It is 4 and 2. I should start right now. Okay, welcome all once again. First of all, let me thank you, Dr. Dilip Bharat. He is Head Department of English at Maharaja Krishna Kumar Singh Ji University, Bhavnagar. And I think I had not that opportunity to meet him, but uh, I should start with the dialogue of Raj Kumar because I am today in a sense of, you can say, mischievous sense. So in one of the movies, Raj Kumar says, sir, that बच्चे जिस स्कूल में आप पढ़ा करते थे उसके प्रिंसिपल हम थे. So this is aptly, you can say, connected to Dr. Bharat, because as far as e-content, as far as these webinars, as far as this, you can say, digital media is concerned, right? He has contributed a lot to education. He had immensely contributed to the education sector of this country, and the nation it is praised or acclaimed all over the nation that he had, I can say, some immense contribution, some immense valuable contribution, right, in this field, right. I have miss I find him as one of the professors who is also a very eminent professor in English literature, as well as technologically he is very sound. He's very, you can say, prominent, and sir, you are always my motivator, and I wish to be you. Thank you, sir, for accepting my invitation. And on behalf of Government Arts and Commerce College, Netrang, Bharuch, Gujarat, I welcome all the guests, all the participants from all over India. Uh, and this is, I think, my 39th of webinar, and we are discussing now how technology will change, right? So I should not waste my time. Sir, over to you. You can start your address.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Jaswantji. It's very interesting. 39th series of talk that is going on webinar. What we see because of this technology, because of this lockdown that has given a new opportunity to everybody is that I talked this in several other webinars also, that what Thomas Friedman used to say in his book, The World is Flat, that the world will become flat once the technology and electricity will be there. And now this is exactly that. A small college like Netrang, government college, that too, the colleges are always in financial crisis. They cannot invite people for talks and other things. Now, these colleges are doing wonderful webinars and inviting people from all the corners of India and having a wonderful gathering. This is how a huge college, a rich college in Bombay, or a very poor, remotely located town place, a village place college, all are having equal play nowadays because of this technology. And yours is a very interesting success story, that for series of things, 39th one in this series is going on here. So today what we are going to talk is about, let me share my slides and see here. So I hope you are able to see the slide.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we want to see this, that how we look at the idea of technology in English literature classroom. Now, there are several concerns that this topic comes in the mind. Is that we talk a lot about English language and technology, but we do not quite often talk about literature classroom and technology. English literature classroom and technology is very rarely talked about topic in various capacities. So we want to explore something in this area, that how we can look at it. I know we will have some of the poll questions, and I know that most of you will say that you all are using technology. You may be dealing with literature also in your classrooms. Maybe it is a compulsory English classroom or a major English classroom or in whatever capacity, but you might be using. But what our concern is that how critically we look at that process also. how can we document that process in different way, and we can like move towards a research in that area also. That is what we want to see. So this question, a rather rhetorical question: is there a technology in English literature, a classroom there? Okay, before we move on, I would request the host to display the poll for
Yes.
everybody. Yeah?
Sir, shall I put it one by one, or shall
First,
I put?
right now, first poll for 60 seconds.
Yes.
Then we will see the result, and then the second poll after seeing the result for 60 seconds. Yeah. Is it visible to everybody? Or?
Yes, sir.
I'm not able to see, so maybe because I am sharing
Sir, because you are
sharing a link.
Yes, yes, sir.
Are people voting?
Yes, sir.
Uh,
3, 4, 5. No, 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 no.
Achha.
Most of them saying no. No.
No, not in
Hello.
this one. Hello.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Just one,
Yes.
sir.
It is there. It is there.
No,
It is there.
not in the chat, but in the poll. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Pardon?
Sir, it is not visible, I think.
It is in the chat, sir.
No,
It is,
not
sir.
in the chat. It was supposed to be in the poll.
So that,
Can Tanveer help in this?
yeah. Tanvi, sir.
Sure.
Sir, I am sending you the poll. Kindly manage it in the poll, right?
Is
Please.
it possible? Then
Yeah.
we can see. We just have to copy paste, but
Yes, sir,
it's
yes, sir.
possible for him to do. A host can do or co-host can do, but it should be launched in advance. Yeah.
Yes. Sir, I have sent.
Okay, is he there? Tanveer, can he tell us something so we can wait for him? Can we listen to Tanveer?
I have, Tanveer here.
Okay, yeah,
Yes, sir.
okay, yeah. Are you putting the polls? First and second you can put right now, then we can continue, and later on you can copy paste those things. Just let us know, is it possible or not? Otherwise we'll move on without poll also.
Just wait.
Yeah.
The stuff that I received was like this.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So you have to copy the first poll one, then AB is options. AB are options.
Yeah.
Have you come across any research on that is the poll question? Then yes, no, that are the options for the answer for that poll. Yeah.
Then we have poll.
Then second poll. So right now poll 1 and 2 you can pick up, and then you can work on. We will move on when the time of 3, 4 will come. At a time you won't be able to do. One by one you will have to pick up.
Yeah. I hope now it is visible to every.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes. It is
No, but this is like it should be in Zoom. I think that feature might not have been tried earlier. So
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought it must be. So I didn't tell you because you are working for so many days. I thought someday the poll feature might have been tried in Zoom.
The poll feature was not tried.
Uh-huh.
We can move ahead, and I will explore it, and maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Then later on you can come with the other. It will come in a series, and we can pick up whichever poll we want to display there. Okay. You can start. Let me share the screen then. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This was like the list of the poll that I think everybody is able to see from my Word document also. Yeah. Have you come across any research on the pedagogy of teaching literature? Yeah. That was one of the questions that was there. Many have responded no. The another was like, do you think that the way we have lots of researches in teaching English language Do we have in a similar way about teaching English literature or not? That was the another question that we were trying to see, or we wanted to explore in these two polls here. So why are we asking this question? Because so far as I remember, in last so many years that I have guided research supervisors, I have evaluated many theses, but I have not come across a single thesis which is talking about the pedagogy of teaching English literature, not literature as such. So that was something alarming to see that why we do not have a research in the area of teaching literature. We have so many works in teaching English language, but not in literature. So that was the concern here. So when we look at why this topic that we are looking here, is that though there are many successful efforts to improve and modernize the teaching of literature, most concern methods of critical interpretation. Whatever research we have, they normally concentrated on methods of critical interpretations rather than pedagogical processes. So we try to look at here at something like pedagogical processes in this here. A few, any relation to the new research on learning, not to speak about exploring personal teaching experiences. New there is a pinging coming up about the people coming in the waiting room. So I'm seeing that on the screen. So new research in learning. Now, when we talk about English language or technology or CALL, C-A-L-L, we obviously start with a variety of learnings. We have the people who are listeners. We have people who are auditory, those people who are kinesthetic kind of learners. So lots of research is there about different types of learners and learner personalities. But when it comes to literature, rarely people concentrate that how the learner personalities, literature and other things also, which is happening a lot in ELT in terms of English language there. So serious and sustained discussion on teaching literature needs to be initiated. Practical teaching practice
So have we lost the audio?
Hello? Hello? Hello?
You are now audible. You are now audible.
Okay, now audible. Okay. There was some technical problem, I think.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So this practical teaching practices, use of technology, research in the pedagogy of English literature teaching, research in teaching practices in English literature classrooms, action research in the use of pedagogical tools like WebQuest, and many other things that perhaps people might be doing, might not be doing, they may be knowing, they may not be knowing also, but this is the concern about looking into technology in English literature classroom there. I asked this question that have you come across any of the work based on these aspects which we are talking about? I would like to refer to this book by Elaine Shalter. Elaine Shalter, we know, is a very famous name in feminist literary theories towards feminist poetics, a very major work written by her. This was the work published in 2003, Teaching Literature. And these are some interesting topics dealt by Elaine Shalter in this book, Anxiety of Teaching Literature, from their theories to methods, then poetry, drama, fiction theory, this all. And in methods of teaching literature, she is also talking about use of technology in teaching literature. Well, but 2003 was a very initial time of the integration of technology. The kind of technologies we have today, one or two examples we will see in the presentation, were not available in those days, the beginning of the 21st century. hardly there was PowerPoint presentation, and rarely there were few websites. Teachers were not able to make their websites or blogs or the thing, but they may use some or the thing. So Elaine Shalter talks about methods of teaching literature, and wherein she brings technology also, but that technology is barely PowerPoint presentation only, which obviously today we do not consider as a use of technology or ICT as such in our classroom. But this is a very interesting work. In line of this work, what we are looking is that we need a debate, a discussion, a sustained argument about what we are doing in our classrooms there, and what technology is doing in our literature classrooms. But when we think of this literature classroom, first of all, we need to define what is English literature. Then we see how and the why part that comes. But what comes is that no, we are not going into what is literature, which is literature is a mirror to society, or it is this or that. Not into that, what is literature, but we want to define specifically in Indian context, in our own Indian context, how do we see what is English literature there. And we want to pinpoint, we want to differentiate English literature from all other kinds of literatures that we have. That is, for example, regional literature in our environment. And then we will see how and why part there. So when we think of what is English literature, we have to concentrate on the remoteness and foreignness of English literature. Our other literatures, like our regional literatures or classical Sanskrit literatures, do not have a foreignness or remoteness. Even though Sanskrit literature is coming from 2000 to 5000 years back, still it is not remote to us because it is a part of our consciousness. So we do not feel a remoteness to a very old literature like a Sanskrit literature in our context, or like Tamil literature in context of Tamil Nadu, or the Telugu or Malayali literature in context of other parts of India. So when we see this foreignness and remoteness of the literature, then we come to know that this English literature, which we try to define, has a kind of a cultural anonymity. The social code of conduct is much different than what we have in our lived experiences here. The religious inconspicuousness is much different. For example, English literature is full of Christian religiosity, and the Christian mythology, Christian religion, superstitions, those things are very much unknown to us in our context. And when we say, I would like to give you one example that which was very popularly many times we have discussed in our classroom when we talk about Hamlet. In Hamlet, there is a scene where Laertes is telling that I would like to kill Hamlet, who has murdered my father, as a part of a revenge, to slit his throat in church. Now the people are questioning that, well, slitting the throat is fine if you want to kill in that way, but why in church do you want to kill Hamlet by slitting the throat? So that was the question. And obviously, when we do a minute reading of literature, all these kinds of questions trouble us a lot. And then we go into the religious aspects of Christianity, and then we find that there is a sort of Christian superstition that if you are in church, if you are near God, but if you are not able to speak, or if you are not vocal about your sins, God will not pardon you. You have to be vocal. So Laertes says that he will be in the church, he will be near God. He might be wanted to ask for the pardon to God, but the slit throat will not allow him to speak anything. So he won't be vocal, and very near to the gates of heaven, he won't get an entry into heaven, because he won't be able to say to the God that this or that, or pardon or forgive, or the prayer, the last prayers he won't. Now this is the Christian mythology, and this is what we say religious inconspicuousness. This become very important in English literature. Mythical aloofness. Greek and Latin mythology are very aloof from our Indian mythologies. The difference in shared collective unconscious. The East is East and West is West. That is what Rudyard Kipling has very famously told. And the point is that there is consciousness of the people which is much different in their context. Geographical remoteness is there. Historical distance also plays a very vital role in looking at this literature. So I think this points makes this idea clear that when we talk of literature, we have to differentiate what is regional literature and what is English literature. Perhaps the teacher of regional literature may not require technology in the classroom, because cultural to social to religious to mythical to geographical to historical remoteness, aloofness, distance is not there. It is very much rooted. For example, Gujarati literature is rooted in Gujarat, and you may not feel any kind of anonymity about that. But in Gujarat, when you deal with English literature, there is a sort of an issue there. Let us see some of the examples that how we look at this idea, and we can get some interesting illustrations about that. If the polls are ready, we can have third, fourth, and fifth poll. Yeah, can I have a talk with Tanvir?
Not yet, sir.
Not yet. Okay, fine. Then let me show you the polls that I had prepared in a Word document, and that will be our plan B to move on with the help of this. So this was like, do you agree that teaching English literature and regional literature requires separate pedagogical strategies and tool or not? Yes, owing to its, you can put your yes or no in comments. You can to this question. Do you agree that teaching English literature and regional literature requires separate pedagogical strategies and tools or not? So that is, and then next one was like, do you use technology in literature classroom? One is yes, and then no. Visual are integral part. I won't be able to see all of your responses, but I think hypothetically that the answer will be yes. Moving pictures, films might be an integral part of literature classrooms. PowerPoint presentations obviously would be an integral part of those things there. Obviously, many argue that words are very important rather than words lead towards imagination and the kind of a thing. But there are very few takers of this argument nowadays because of powerful media, the digital media, the screen, the way it has engulfed the entire world. This is becoming problematic, but it is a very interesting point of debate there. Fifth and the last one for this point was, do you use Google Image in literature classroom? Google Image. And I want to give you some of the examples of this using Google Image in the classroom. So, for example, there was this poem that we were discussing in the classroom. This was from I.A. Richards' practical criticism. And in this poem, as we know that I.A. Richards deals with poetry in the classroom as a kind of a pedagogy, that no title of the poem, no name of the poet, just poetry full of words, and it is given to the students to analyze, a very popular method of teaching literature in our classrooms. And normally poetry classrooms are using this pedagogical tool or a strategy to deal with poetry in the classroom. Now, when we were reading this poem, there came this word Hawthorne, and then Noon's blue pitcher, this words. And it was very difficult to open these words. New criticism is all about opening the words. Each and every word should be opened so that the poem can be dissected properly. Dissection of the poetry. Because we also study Nathaniel Hawthorne's work, A Scarlet Letter, the very first idea that comes in the mind when we see Hawthorne is that Hawthorne might be
So we perhaps lost the audio.
audio is not visible.
He is. No, he's there. Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
You're
Audible?
yes.
Okay, yeah, okay. Just let me know in case my audio fails. Yeah.
Yes.
So like when we see Noon's blue pitcher, the poetry was dealing with morning after. So people think that noon is a time of the day and it is personified. So Noon's blue pitcher, there is a personification of the time of the day. And then the time of the day is having a blue pitcher. And that was how we thought this must be the meaning. But then when I thought that let me ask Google image, and let me search something in Google image about this all things. So when we asked Google image, it gave this images of hawthorns. Hawthorns are shrubs.
Professor Barrow, your audio is not working, sir. Sir, audio is missing, sir. There may be some network.
Bharat,
sir.
your audio is muted.
Uh-huh.
Your audio is muted.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
I reconnected. There was some technical problem
Yeah,
again. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm.
So I was talking about this hawthorn, cloud looking down, and then this white hawthorn flowers, green meadows, and it gives an image to cloud, from that perspective of a cloud, that there is a green meadow and white water is splashed there. So this is what Google image gave as a result. And then hawthorn is not Nathaniel Hawthorne. Hawthorn is not the last name of somebody. Hawthorn is a shrub, and a particular time in a season it grows white flowers, and then the cloud is watching. There is a green meadows and white flowers, and then you see that there is a milk splashed over a green meadow. The another was even more difficult. This blue picture. This. So when we again Googled it in image search, we found this image. There is a blue picture, and then there are flowers. And then what we found is that this is a painting made by somebody known as Suzanne Noon. So Noon was actually a surname of somebody. Noon was a surname of somebody. Hawthorne was not the surname of somebody, but this was a surname, and it was a painting by Suzanne Noon. And then the way the flowers are split, that was an imagery that was given there. Now, this way, a small poem, but reading of the poem, the meaning of the poem, the very interpretation of the poem changed a lot because of Google image. And otherwise, it was very difficult to find that Suzanne Noon is somebody whose painting is of blue picture, or hawthorns may be of this kind. It can be shrub, that dictionary can tell me, but it will sound like a milk splashed over meadows. Might have been a very difficult task to look into that also. So this is one example. Later on, when we were dealing with this Dr. Faustus's play, Christopher Marlowe's play, Dr. Faustus. And these lines, till swollen with cunning of self-conceit, his waxen wings did mount above his reach, and melting heavens conspired his overthrow came. It again was like, what is Marlowe trying to do or trying to say when he wants to mythically connect Dr. Faustus and his fall with fall of something that was great in Greek, with cunning, self-conceit, waxen wings, mount above his reach, melting heavens conspired his overthrow. When again, just these words are given to Google image, we found wonderful paintings about the flight of Icarus. And this flight of Icarus gave us a myth of Daedalus and Icarus, father and son. The father has made the waxen wings for the son. Son started flying higher and higher, reached near the sun. The wax started melting, and then there is a fall of a son, the tragedy of the young fellow, the son in before the eyes of father. That is what it tries to say. But then this was not possible without images. There are wonderful graphical paintings of Greek mythology, but they may not be easily available in the museums of India. Even if they are available, will our students be able to go to the museums and see all those paintings. Obviously, traveling abroad is nearly impossible. Even in our own cities, going to the museums is not that easy. Well, here Google Image brings the entire museum of mythologies and paintings before in our classrooms there. There was another poll, but I think that won't be ready. Tanveer? Yeah. Okay, let us move on. This image now.
Hello.
Hi,
Sir,
yes, yeah.
my poll setting was off. So
Acha, okay.
in order to make that work, I have to restart the meeting. So I just
Acha.
did that.
Okay, now have you done that?
Now I have switched it on the poll
Okay.
option, but in order to make it workable, I'll have to restart the meeting. So I just
Okay.
restart the meeting.
Okay, fine. Okay, then have you started or no need to start now?
No need to start. No, we won't be
No
restarting.
need to, yeah, no need to have a poll. We will have in a way, but that itself is a good learning lesson, because in webinars we keep on learning every time something new about various features that these digital platforms are providing to us there. So this painting we're talking about, and then if you will see carefully, if you've seen earlier, you will come to know what this painting is about. Otherwise, in the corner down there, you will find that somebody has fallen in the waters of ocean, and the leg is visible in the corner down. This right hand side bottom, somebody has fallen. So this is Peter Bruegel's painting of the fall of Icarus. But this is rather a very curious painting. In the previous painting, if you will see this painting, the fall is at the center. In this, the fall has gone on the periphery. It has gone moved to the periphery. Now, these two paintings, it doesn't only help us dealing with Dr. Faustus or the Greek myth or the fall of Icarus and Daedalus thing, but it also helps us in understanding decentering the center. Derridian idea about post-structuralism, decentering the center. So how in this image, the centrality is not important, but something, the periphery, is very important. That becomes very interesting when we see that. Now see how this image is. Google Image gives us the images which we have not imagined also. This is like because Elaine Salter is talking about personal experiences of literature teachers. This was the personal experience that when I was looking for that, this painting also came, and I was surprised that what is this painting doing with the myth of Icarus. And then when I explored, I came to know that this is also the same painting, and you have to see on the periphery, on the border, to understand the meaning of this painting. So now see how technology is supporting teachers in the classroom. And even if that was not the question in the mind of teachers, the technology is prompting them that you can see this also, you can see that also, and then the entire classroom environment becomes very interesting, full of discussion and debates also. One more example was about Waiting for Godot. This play, as we know, Beckett wrote this play, and a very simple language is there. The language is so simple that even we rarely have to refer to dictionaries to understand these words. I have put a list of dialogues there, and everybody will find that not a single word is a difficult word that I have to refer to a dictionary, common dictionary, not a picture dictionary there. But the beauty of Beckett's writing is that he has fooled the language, or he has infused the language with lots of connotations, obviously cultural one and religious ones also. So even when we look at a word like the willow, the leaves, and weeping in this, it obviously gives us a question that what are these questions? What is this language? What is Vladimir and Estragon trying to say? And what Beckett wants to tell to us? Are we missing out something from this? So these words again were given to Google Image search, and Google Image gave this picture, Weeping Willow. And then when you read more about Weeping Willow, you find that in Ireland, Beckett belonged to Ireland. In Irish culture, Weeping Willow is a symbol of positivity, about good thing to happen. So there are different cultural meanings that are given to Weeping Willow. But what is paradoxical here is that when the tree is full of leaves, they say it is Weeping Willow. Normally, we think that when the branches are without leaves, we would say that the tree is crying because the leaves are shaded down. But here, the leaves are full. And then, so when he writes that, but where are the leaves? So he says, no more weeping. It must be dead, perhaps. No more weeping. So if there are leaves, the tree might be weeping. But tree is not weeping also. Tree is perhaps dead. We know that the setting of Beckett's play is just one tree and no leaves. In the second part, there is only one leaf. So that was the setting which we can connect here. In this, perhaps Beckett wants to say that nature is completely indifferent to human beings. Nature perhaps do not care for the human beings about whether you read it weeping or laughing. Nature perhaps do not care, and that is the deeper meaning that the existentialists wanted to convey through these kinds of cultural connotations there. The second reference was this shrub, bush. So looks to me more like a bush. Last lines, yeah? A shrub, a bush. So what is that? So when we try to look at bush, I came across through Google image burning bush, the idea of burning bush. And then when I refer, I found that there is a religious myth connected with burning bush. And it says that when Moses was on the top of a mountain, he had a talk with God, and actually God was talking through a burning bush. So it was not human being on the other side that was talking with Moses, who came down the mountain with 10 commandments. It was not the person coming and talking, but it was a bush from where the sound of the burning bush, he listened in such a way that the God is trying to say this commandment. So Beckett here also is making a very deep religious connotations, which obviously might have been missed by many readers of Beckett's Waiting for Godot. They might not have gone this deep to understand what all these things mean, because as we discussed, that English literature is so aloof, so remote from our own existence, that these all things are not readily referred to us. I give an example that when I read a poem by Sarojini Naidu, and the title of the poem is A Flute Player from Vrindavan. Now, as soon as I get a flute player from Vrindavan, I come to know that this is Krishna only. Even if Sarojini Naidu do not write anywhere the word Krishna, without any problem, I can easily understand that this is a poem about Lord Krishna. And it is Vrindavan. So there is Ras Leela, there is love. It's a love poem. Nobody has to tell me, because culturally I am connected with Sarojini Naidu's world, whereas in the Western it's a huge problem. Dictionaries don't help, and some kind of technology, a little bit of technology like Google image only in our classroom makes a huge difference when we deal with those things there. So these were some of those examples that how a simple technology of Google image, which now most of our students are also having with them. And anytime teachers can throw the question that open Google image and try to see what are you getting, and variety of images students will see, and lots of interesting discussion may happen. What are our practical practices in literature classrooms, and how technology is helping enriching our discussions of literature? That is the point which we need to explore a lot. We need to do a research also in this area. We are not talking a lot about it. We are not writing even research papers based on these kinds of activities. The way I made a point, we write a lot about what is happening in English language classrooms, but we rarely think and talk about what is happening in English literature classrooms there. The second point that I come from here is I'm just admitting a few waiting, which are popping up again and again. Okay, so how a part of integrating a technology in the classroom there. Obviously, we can do flipped learning, we can do variety of things, but what we tried in our classrooms, and we got quite a good amount of success also in dealing with integration of technology here, was that we later on in last couple of years, we started using Google Classroom for teaching literature. We asked our students to write blogs on whatever things they do. We asked our students to make PowerPoint presentations, and the presentations should be uploaded on digital platforms. We selected one platform like slideshare.net, and all the PPTs, PowerPoint presentations, were uploaded on slideshare.net. Students' videos of presentations are shoot, and they also are uploaded on YouTube channels. So in that all way, a technology is integrated where not only teacher is using technology, but simultaneously students are also using technology. When we think of integrating or using technology in the classroom, several times we have made this remark that the cycle of using technology in the classroom completes if students are also using technology. If only teachers use technology, it is the half cycle. This I refer to the book which I was talking about, this teaching literature by Elaine Sholter. In this book, when she refers to technology, it is still only teachers' use of technology. But this book is almost 17 years old now. And in 17 years, lot many things have changed in such a way that now we can also think that how students can use technology and work with blogs and lot many other activities there. We are not going to see the work that is produced by students, but I would suggest that on the screen, you might be seeing one website with my name. There is dilipbharat.com/PBL, that is Project Blended Learning. So later on, when you will explore this website, you will find the work done by the students on digital platforms there, and that can help you a lot in understanding that how the technology can be integrated in classroom practices also there. So that is that point we are not exploring, but I would keep it up to the participants. Those who are interested can explore this part of how technology can be integrated in English literature classrooms. The last part of the thing that we want to see is why we think of this in this context. When we think of why, we have to think that technology and literature still are not on good terms with each other. For example, literature as such do not have a good relation with science and technology. The way religion and science and technology keeps on conflicting with each other, in a similar way, literature and technology also keeps on conflicting with each other. Well, to give an example, I can say that when industrial revolution was happening in the beginning of 20th century, industrial revolution is obviously a product of science and technology of those years. Most of the literary writers were against industrialization of villages, rural spaces. They always wrote about deserted villages. Victorian literature is full of a kind of a feeling that we are losing something. Our rural spaces are losing something. Wordsworth's poem like Michael also is an old man waiting for a son to come back who has gone to work in a factory. So factory is science and technology, industry is science and technology, and literature will always take the side of that. Another famous example to prove my point that how literature and science and technology are always having locked horns is Charlie Chaplin's The Modern Times. Very obviously, you might have seen The Modern Times, a machine kind of a life, and Charlie Chaplin says, what about human beings in this mechanical life? So that is one point, that there is always a kind of a conflict between literature and technology. Now, in this, when we talk of digital humanities, we see this is an oxymoron word. This digital and humanities, they do not go very well with each other. If you refer to works like 1984 by George Orwell or Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, they all say that, well, technology is for surveillance, technology is for control, and literary writers want human beings to be free. Freedom is always at the center of literary imagination, freedom for human beings. And technology always remains a symbol of control. And that's why digital humanities becomes an oxymoron. But as we move into the time of 21st century, we come to know that without digital, things are impossible now. So we have to find a midway. 20th century conflict with technology was okay. But in 21st century, we can't move on with the same conflict of 20th century or the Victorian times or the Romantics that they used to have, that we have to find a new solution to that conflict. So this article by Matthew Kirschenbaum is a very interesting article which can be seen into this context, where he questions what is digital humanities, and what's it doing in English departments. So Matthew Kirschenbaum tries to argue and say in this context that he says that whenever or people talk about technology in humanities department or the departments of languages and literature, it was English departments where technology entered first time. So there may be regional literature departments in all the universities. And I'm not talking only about India, I talk about Europe also, French, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, anybody, Russian, any languages. So in among all these languages, it was the English departments where the technology was given perhaps an early entry. That is, Matthew Kirschenbaum is arguing. And he says there are several reasons for that. Reason number one, he says that when the computer technologies, the technology we think in terms of digital, started shaping, it was happening in English language, like alphabets like A, B, C, D, or digits 1, 2, 3, or 0, 1, obviously were English digits that were playing an initial role into that. Then the very first uploaders on the websites were also belonging to English literature. Because English literature, the typeset, the typing type, everything matched with the technology, because it was also growing with the coding was happening with alphabets, that is English alphabets. There was some kind of bonding at the birthplace of the digital things and this. And so initial uploads of any literature on websites, it was of English literature. A second point, that is why perhaps English departments are more ready to deal with technology or websites or blogs in their classrooms than the other people are ready to do those things. Third one, a very interesting example he says is that English departments are by and large more open than the other language departments. Again, other language, I don't say only Indian regional languages, I say any other languages. So people dealing with English literature, or they are more global in their perspective. They are more open to cultural diversities. They are more open to accept new ideas and new thoughts. So they may perhaps be leaders in one or the other way in taking those ideas. And that is why perhaps digital things started shaping into English departments in one or the other ways. So that gives some idea that how we look at this idea, digital humanities in this, and how English departments started finding a way, the connection between literature and technology also. At the same time, what we come to know is that we have started looking at something what we known as generation of literature or generative literature. If we ask people questions like, can you write a poetry on computer? Many people will say, no, I am habitual of writing with hand, pen in the hand, and then my imagination works, and typing is still very difficult. New generation people may not have a problem. They perhaps would be very good with their mobile phones in typing poetry or typing on laptops, but still the old generation people will say that when you hold a pen in the hand, then something sparks in the mind and your imagination works and you can write. So that was one concern, that you can't write poetry on computer. We have very interesting famous examples of people like Ernest Hemingway, who used to type all his novels. He never used to write, but he used to have a typewriter, and throughout the night, standing before typewriter, he used to type all the stories there, and he is a Nobel laureate. We all know The Old Man and the Sea and famous works written by Ernest Hemingway. So this idea that whether I can write imaginative things when I hold a pen in the hand or I type, these are just habits of mind, which becomes interesting. But our question is not that now. Today, our question is, can a computer write poetry or not? So it is not can a human write a poetry on computer? No, that is gone days now. Today's question, or the question that we have to ask in time to come, is about, can a computer write a poetry or not? And this is what we call a generative literature. if people have doubt about this, whether the literature can be written or not, I would suggest this website, botpoet.com. And on this botpoet.com, you will find what is computer poetry. And there is interesting play. They give a poem and then they ask whether this poem is written by a human being or a robot. So people can take a test, and it's a very interesting website to understand what is computer poetry, what is generative literature, and what is robot poet, and other things also. There are very interesting other websites like poemgenerator.org.uk, poem generator machines. So if you want to write haiku, quick poem, sonnet, limerick, just go to website, give keywords, and literature is generated. So we used to have up till now one literature which we call creative literature. Now we are moving into the dynamics where we have generative literature. That the time will come when we will say obviously that, well, this is my favorite human poet, this is my favorite machine poet, this is my favorite robot poet. We are moving into those days, and then the concern will come that our poetics was written for the human literature, that is literature created by human beings. We will have to look for the poetics and literary theories wherein how to analyze the literature which is generated by machines, generated by computers and other things also there. So that is another dynamics that we need to explore and look, and these things are happening a lot nowadays. And so our why part, that we need to think seriously about what technology is doing in our classroom. So see, we are moving on. Google Image is one part as a pedagogy of teaching something. From there, we are exploring that if computers will write literature, then how are we going to read those literatures there? This is a very interesting example which was experienced during lockdown period. And this is a Facebook page. Stream On is a Facebook page, and this team of people, this is the World Theatre Laboratory. They experimented performance of play during lockdown through Zoom on YouTube. On Facebook. So people sitting in various continents, and they are performing before a tiny camera through a Zoom, and it is not reading of a play. Let me make this point very clear. Not reading, but actually performing, sitting and performing, and then collectively on a simple frame, we see 4 or 5 characters. They keep on performing with each other, but they are not on one stage. That is not on a physical stage. They are together on virtual stage, and that virtual stage is Zoom or any digital web streaming platform. And audience is sitting before Facebook. See how the dynamics of performance of the play is changing in this time. So the lockdown time has given or allowed us to explore the possibilities of performance of literature. Now, these kinds of performances, when it comes, we are habituated of reading the performance on the stage, but we are not habituated to read the performance over Zoom, the performance over Facebook, and then how to write about it, how to think about it, how to research these kinds of literature. These are going to be very pertinent questions in coming years there. So from digital writing to researching tools, poem generator, performance on the digital platforms, to a kind of a research analysis, that also becomes very interesting here. I would like to share the other screen to talk about this. There is a very interesting project that is going on about Ngram project by Google Books. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Google Books Ngram project. Yeah.
Yes,
so,
sir.
This is yeah. So this is one another one. Like when you use a research tool, and your research tool is a digital something digital, which is doing a kind of an analysis of your data and presenting some charts before us. And how do we do the analysis of this thing? This is an example which I have discussed in many other webinars also. So the people who are repeating the webinars might be knowing about this example here. This is like Google Books have uploaded books of last 200 years. You see on the screen from 1800 to 2008, the books are uploaded. And when you give keywords to Ngram project they will prepare a chart and they will show us that how many times this word has been discussed, or how many times this word has been used in different capacities. So this analysis there. So as an experiment, I gave these 3 words: Sherlock Holmes, we know a popular character, Sherlock Holmes, Albert Einstein, and Frankenstein. Now, why this is very curious is because Frankenstein is much older text. You will see down the line 1800, before 1800 also. The green line of Frankenstein is lying at the bottom of the chart. Later on, red line of Sherlock Holmes comes after 1880s, and Albert Einstein comes around 1920, after 1900 there. So Frankenstein was already there, but it was not much talked about, to such an extent that even the historiographer of English literatures, they rarely took notice of a text like Frankenstein. And Mary Shelley is a writer also. So when you look at the historiography, and then you find that rarely people are talking about this text. Suddenly, after 1980s, there is a spike in the popularity of Frankenstein, and so many people are talking a lot about Frankenstein and Mary Shelley. What we see here is that why is Mary Shelley and the work Frankenstein missed out by the historiographer of English literature? Is it because of the kind of a patriarchy that governs our writing of history? So even if some women writer has written a kind of a ghost story or a story like Frankenstein, and they do not take notice of, they say it is a popular literature, it is a cheap literature, and this is not a good writing at all. Perhaps the patriarchal aspect of historiography has played a vital role in not recording Mary Shelley in a proper way. Well, the writer Frankenstein and this work became very popular, and it is very popular even today's time also there. Second example, if you want to just explore, like this, in this example I have given Indian languages, Tamil, Hindi, Bengali, Marathi, Gujarati, and just to look at it, that in whatever store of books Google Books have, in all those books, which language is much talked about what things are written in the repository that Google Books have. Well, we find Tamil is at the top and Gujarati is at the bottom. When we do that analysis, and we come with an analysis that why this happens, how this happens, why even in India, Tamil is much higher than Hindi also. So are people talking a lot about Tamil? There is much of intellectual debates that are happening in and around Tamil language. Then it happens in Hindi or Bengali or Marathi or Gujarati kind of thing. Lots of there are many questions that comes up when a digital tool like this is used here. Now see, if I use a word English here, I am typing a word English here to see the comparison. You can just keep in mind the analysis of Tamil, Hindi, Bengali. Now I put this and I'm searching. I'm to see what changes does it bring. And now see that the graph, how the graph has changed completely. So now see, as compared to English language, how the Indian languages perform. So almost at the bottom you find the way this happens. Now see, this is something like digital tools, and it gives us wonderful charts, and something that perhaps we have not seen because we can't see the text in this largeness. People have said that when we do a micro study, we can see a branch of a tree. But if you want to see entire forest, what kind of tools we require? We have to fly like a drone somewhere up. We have to go without drone and kind of it is not possible. So these are kinds of drone view that we are getting when we use statistical analysis to look into this matters here. Coming back to my slides. Yeah, are you able to see full screen? Full screen? Is it visible? Yeah, okay. I got a nod from Jaswant sir. So yes. This is another work. Matthew Joker's microanalysis has explored this all possibilities that how it can be done. This work by Aiden and Michel, Uncharted, Big Data as a lens on human culture, cultureonomics is another work which has already done very interesting beginning work into this exploration of digital humanities or digital as a tool for a research, and very interesting examples we are getting there. These are some of the charts that they are discussing there, like where people talk about science and religion. So we find that 1800 was a time of religion. Religion is at the top, science is at the bottom, and then slowly and steadily coming down to 2000, the lines are intercepting and science is crossing over the religion. Fever and cancer, for example, 1800 there was nothing like cancer, and suddenly coming down to 2000, cancer is way ahead of fever. So these things are also the result of this analysis. New York and London, you see that it was around First World War that Europe and England and London, which was the center of the world, mark, and slowly and steadily around 1970s and 80s, New York becomes the center of the world. So what we believe into several things, we get statistical evidence about whatever interpretations we try to do into these aspects also. Finally, while we come down to the conclusion part, apart from all these things, we have very interesting new challenges to be seen into this, and that is coming from artificial intelligence. Because it has been seen that our artificial intelligence also is growing with the unconscious bias of human beings. We know that we are biased in such a way, like we have gender bias, we have color bias, we have colonial bias, and many other things that play a very vital role in various societies and cultures. We thought that technology will be free from human bias because technology do not grow into caste, creed, color, ethnicity, religiosity, nationality. Nothing is controlling technology. It is free from all these things. So we thought initially that artificial intelligence will grow, but that is not happening. The works which is done by Kirti Sharma and Robin Hauser, they have proved that our artificial intelligence also display a very interesting aspect of gender bias. And that happens because the people who are working behind artificial intelligence, that is our software engineers, if they are biased, our machines are going to be biased. So this research obviously tells us that we need to have humanities and literary theories, even for software engineers, even for the IITians and other people, so that their machines and artificial intelligence are free from the human biases there. This is again an interesting project about ethical concerns or moral concerns. We know that literature basically pertinently deals with the very idea about moral and ethical things. This is the MIT project. The website link is given, moralmachine.mit.edu. And under this project, they try to see that if a driverless car, which is driven by artificial intelligence, has to meet with an accident, and then one side there is a cyclist, the other side there is a pedestrian, there is a car coming from there, we can put two more objects, there is a child playing there, there is an old man also. Now, if that car has a choice that accident is going to happen, there is no choice, accident or no accident, but there is a choice whom to kill, to bang with a car, to bang with a cyclist, a child or an old man, then what decision the car will make, the artificial intelligence will make. This moral machine website will help us that whatever decisions human beings are going to make, the same decisions our machines are going to make also. So if I am in that car, what am I going to do? What will be my choice? If I have to kill somebody, will I go for killing an old man, or will I go for killing a child? See what is happening in the real world also in this COVID times, when we are shutting down lockdowns and we are opening our markets and cities, and we are moving towards herd immunity. What choices we are making is that because of this, perhaps old people, ailing people, people suffering from illness, having any other kind of terminal illness of kidney or throat infection, they may perhaps die, but normal healthy person and children may not die. And now that is what we are making a choice, that well, opening up lockdown obviously means that let the ailing people, the people with some kind of disease die, the old people, let them die. the young people will survive. Now, that is exactly what our machines are going to do. We are in that moment of time where we want to save economy or human beings, whether you want to save Jan be, Jahan be, when you want to have livelihood and lives. We are moving now. The entire world today is moving towards livelihood, economy, rather than the human lives. Machines are going to make. But these are very pertinent questions, which our literature, our research will also have to deal with this. So while the literary project of making humans human is yet not over, the humanities people have new challenges to make robots also human now. We have to also make artificial intelligence also human. We want to see more researches in the pedagogy of teaching literatures also in this dynamics here. I think I have made my point. Thank you all of you for your patience listening. And